Imagine a 5-cent hamburger, served in 30 seconds. That was the invention. But the history of McDonald's is not the story of a recipe, it is the story of a system. Today, McDonald's is a fortress. It is the most dominant real estate and food service empire in history, with over 40,000 locations in 100 countries. But the founder who built that empire, Ray Kroc, did not invent the system. He was a 52-year-old salesman whose life was going nowhere. He found the system, recognized its perfect potential, and then executed one of the most ruthless strategic takeovers in business history. This is a story about the painful truth of scaling. It's about the difference between being a brilliant inventor and being an empire builder. It is the story of how an ambitious salesman legally outmaneuvered the brothers who created the Golden Arches and turned a single burger stand into a multi-billion-dollar machine. This story is 7 chapters long, and we hope you love it. Chapter 1, the story of Ray Kroc begins not with success, but with a lifetime of mid-level hustle. For 30 years, Ray Kroc was the definition of an average American salesman. He was a piano player, a paper cup distributor, a traveling huckster. He had a million ideas, but none of them ever hit. He was a salesman of pure, unrelenting energy. He was a man who believed if he just made one more call, if he just drove one more mile, he would finally hit his big break. But by 1954, Kroc was 52 years old. His body was aching, and he was working his hardest, selling his one and only proprietary product, the Prince Castle Multimixer. The Multimixer was a simple piece of equipment. It was a metal machine that could blend 5 milkshakes at once. Kroc loved it because it represented efficiency. It was the perfect tool for a world obsessed with speed. But his sales were terrible. Drive-ins and diners rarely needed more than one milkshake blender. He was depressed, driving across the country, selling 1 or 2 machines at a time, watching his career and his merits fizzle. He had built a life on the belief that energy and persistence always pay off, but he was running out of time. Then, one morning in 1954, an order landed on his desk that made no financial sense. It was a phone call from a small town in San Bernardino, California. The order was for 8 multi-mixers. 8 machines meant this single restaurant was blending 40 milkshakes at the exact same time. That was unheard of. That was an industrial operation. Kroc thought it was a mistake. He thought the decimal point was in the wrong place. He called the restaurant back, and the voice on the other end was quiet, calm, and utterly confident. The man said, "No, that is correct. We need 8 machines. Come see what we are doing." Ray Kroc, the tired, ambitious 52-year-old salesman, smelled the system. He was not interested in selling mixers anymore. He was interested in understanding why this single restaurant needed so much capacity. He packed his bags, climbed into his Ford, and started the long, desperate drive to San Bernardino. He knew this was either a lunatic, or it was the future. Ray Kroc finally arrived in San Bernardino, California. He parked his car down the block and walked toward a hamburger stand with 2 giant golden arches flanking the building. He saw the line of customers, but he didn't see chaos. He saw a machine. This wasn't a driven restaurant. There were no car hops, no waitresses, and no long lines of horns honking. There were just people walking up to a window, placing an order, and receiving their food in 30 seconds. Kroc was fascinated. He ordered a hamburger, walked over to a picnic table, and spent the next hour just watching the kitchen. Inside, 2 men named Dick and Mac McDonald had solved the fundamental problem of the modern restaurant: speed and consistency. They had taken every component of the kitchen, the grill, the fryer, the condiments, and stripped away the complexity. They didn't cook anything to order. They ran a Speedee Service System. The kitchen was laid out like an assembly line. One employee focused only on the grill, another only focused on the fryer, a third only dressed the buns. They replaced traditional, fragile dishware with paper bags and cups. They limited the menu to 9 items: hamburgers, cheeseburgers, fries, soft drinks, and those incredible milkshakes. The entire process was engineered for minimum movement and maximum output. Kroc watched an employee take a burger patty, toss it onto the grill, and use a tool to perfectly place the 7-to-1 ratio of condiments in exactly the same spot every time. It was the Henry Ford model applied to food service. Ray Kroc had spent his life selling an efficient machine, the multi-mixer, but here, he saw the ultimate, living machine, the system itself. He realized that the value was not the 5-cent hamburger. The value was the process. The value was the predictability. When he finally met Dick and Mac McDonald, they were engineers, not restaurateurs. They were quiet, technical, and obsessed with shaving a few seconds off the French fry cycle. They had done the impossible. They had created a highly profitable, scalable, self-operating system. They had built a perfect machine, but they had no ambition to run it globally. They were content running their single, profitable stand in San Bernardino. Ray Kroc, the ambitious, tireless salesman, saw the future. He didn't see 1 stand, he saw 1,000. He delivered the ultimate pitch. He didn't want to buy their restaurant. He wanted to franchise their system across the entire United States. The brothers, wary of franchising after several bad local deals, were initially resistant. But Kroc's energy was overwhelming. He made them a deal. He would personally handle all the headaches, the travel, and the financing. In 1955 they signed the contract. Ray Kroc became the exclusive national franchising agent for the McDonald brothers, for an upfront fee of $2,700, and a contract that guaranteed the brothers 0.5% of gross sales as a royalty. Ray Kroc finally had his ticket. He had acquired the greatest secret weapon in American food service history, but he was about to learn that he had signed the worst contract of his life. Chapter 2. Ray Kroc had the contract. He had the genius of the Speedee Service System. He was ready to conquer America. He quit his job. He used his life savings, the last $15,000 he had, to set up his own first McDonald's franchise in Des Plaines, Illinois, near Chicago. This was the template. This was the flagship. But the moment he signed the contract, Kroc realized he had committed a financial disaster. The deal he signed with the McDonald brothers was an anchor. The terms were simple and crippling. 1. Low royalty. Kroc was required to pay the brothers 0.5% of gross sales. 2. Kroc share. Kroc kept only 1.4% of gross sales as his own commission. 3. The franchisee fee. The rest of the fee went to the local franchisee, who built the restaurant and paid Kroc an initial fee of around $950. The math was impossible. The margins were paper-thin. On a single 5-cent hamburger, Ray Kroc was making less than 1/10 of a penny. He was traveling constantly, managing construction, and dealing with franchise disputes, all for a tiny slice of an already small pie. Kroc opened 18 restaurants in his first year, and he was quickly running out of cash. The brothers' 0.5% royalty alone was sinking the entire operation. He was working 18 hours a day, sleeping in cheap motels, and financially bleeding to death. His personal finances were a wreck. He couldn't pay himself a salary. His marriage dissolved under the stress. He had traded a stable, modest income for massive debt and a title, franchising agent for the McDonald brothers. He was stuck with a terrible contract and a limited scope of authority. He couldn't change the menu, the prices, or the core system that was all locked down by the McDonald brothers in San Bernardino. The brothers, meanwhile, were sitting comfortably in California, collecting their guaranteed royalty checks and living a quiet, profitable life. They had successfully leveraged Kroc's hustle without taking any of his risk. Ray Kroc had to pivot or die. He realized that the business was not in the 1.4% commission from the burgers. He had to create an entirely new revenue stream that the original contract did not foresee. He found his answer through the eyes of his most crucial hire. Harry Sonneborn was a former financial executive for Tysta Phrases. He looked at Kroc's business and didn't see a burger company. He saw a real estate problem. Sonneborn laid out the ultimate strategy. You are not in the food business. You are in the real estate business. The key was to change the unit of sale. Kroc wasn't going to sell the franchise. He was going to sell the land. Ray Kroc was trapped. He was working for a 1.4% commission while the McDonald brothers held all the power and the revenue anchor of 0.5% of gross sales. He was selling franchises, but he was building wealth for the two men who had hired him. He was 52, broke, and furious. His salvation arrived in the form of a financial strategist named Harry Sonneborn. Looked at the operation and saw the flaw in the brothers' vision. They focused on the product, the burger. Kroc was focusing on the system, the franchise. Sonneborn pointed out that the true asset was neither the burger nor the system, but the land that the system sat on. Sonneborn's thesis was simple. Franchising is not about selling licenses. It is about control. To gain control and solve the financial crisis, Sonneborn demanded the creation of a new, completely separate corporate entity. In 1956, they founded the Franchise Realty Corporation, FRC. This company had one terrifying mission. FRC would buy and lease the land underneath every single new McDonald's franchise. The new business model worked like this. 1. FRC Kroc's company identifies the site for the new restaurant. 2. FRC uses heavy bank leverage to buy the land and erect the building. 3. FRC leases the land and building back to the franchisee for a non-negotiable fixed monthly rent, plus a percentage of their gross sales. This solved Kroc's biggest problems overnight. The revenue shifted from a tiny 1.4% commission on food sales to a massive, stable real estate revenue from rent. This secured his cash flow and protected him from the volatility of the food market. The lease agreement was legally superior to the franchise agreement. If a franchisee stepped out of line, Ray Kroc could legally evict them, instantly stripping them of the business and the name. Kroc now had ultimate leverage over his own franchisees. The business was no longer hamburgers. It was real estate investment trust, REIT disguised as a food company. Sonneborn explained this strategy clearly. Our business is not selling hamburgers. Our business is owning the land on which the restaurants are situated. This shift was the foundation of the modern McDonald's empire. The company that sells burgers is not the company that holds the financial power. But this revolutionary strategy brought Kroc into direct conflict with the founding brothers. The McDonald brothers looked at the real estate operation and saw Kroc acting like a predatory landlord. They complained that FRC was taking on too much debt and changing the core nature of their invention. Kroc had solved his financial problems by creating an entirely new company, but the fundamental anchor, the 0.5% royalty to the brothers, was still draining the revenue from every transaction. Ray Kroc had built a global machine, but he didn't own the name on the front door. He knew what he had to do. He had to completely buy out the brothers and wipe their names from the ledger forever. Chapter 3. By the early 1960s, Ray Kroc had solved the core business problem through real estate. His company, Franchise Realty Corporation, was buying the land and collecting massive, secure rent checks from the franchisees. He was finally making serious money, but the original contract was a constant, crippling anchor: the McDonald brothers' 0.5% royalty of gross sales, plus their control over the core system, prevented Kroc from making necessary changes to the growing operation. He couldn't go public, he couldn't get the financing he needed for national expansion, and he couldn't update the menu without their explicit, often reluctant, approval. He realized the franchise structure was a masterwork, but the contract with the founders was a fatal flaw. Ray Kroc decided to end the relationship entirely. He needed a clean break. He needed to buy the McDonald's name and the system outright. He flew to San Bernardino and made the McDonald brothers an offer designed to be irresistible: an all-cash, massive settlement. The price was $2.7 million. This figure was carefully calculated. It was designed to give each brother $1 million after taxes, a life-changing sum of cash in 1961. The high all-cash offer was a strategic move to bypass lawyers and accountants who might advise the bros to negotiate for a stake in the growing empire. The negotiation was simple. Kroc offered them total financial security in exchange for every single right to the name and the system. The brothers, who were engineers and inventors, not empire builders, agreed. They wanted the money, and they wanted peace and quiet. But the deal contained two critical, defining elements: one that was written, and one that was a handshake promise. The written contract transferred all intellectual property to Kroc, including the name, the Speedee Service System, and the Golden Arches. This legally wiped the brothers from the corporate future. The handshake agreement concerned the original, flagship restaurant in San Bernardino. The brothers wanted to keep their single, profitable store, the original McDonald's stand, since it was physically separate and operating successfully. Ray Kroc agreed to let them keep the land and the business. But he added a crucial, verbally enforced condition: they had to change the name. Kroc viewed the existence of the original McDonald's as a direct affront to the purity of his national brand. He was paying $2.7 million to own the name. He would not tolerate the founders running a rogue operation. The brothers refused to change the name, arguing it was their heritage. Kroc insisted. The conflict was so intense that the issue was never put into the written contract. It remained an unwritten gentleman's, or perhaps a salesman's agreement. The brothers ultimately succumbed to the pressure. They sold the name, they closed the original location and renamed it the Big M. Ray Kroc immediately opened a new McDonald's franchise a block away and undercut the Big M until the original stand was financially crushed and closed forever. Ray Kroc had achieved ultimate victory. He had eliminated the founders, wiped their business from the map, and secured total sole control over the fastest-growing brand in America. With the McDonald brothers bought out for $2.7 million, Ray Kroc was finally free. The anchor of the 0.5% royalty was lifted. The name and the system now belonged solely to him. He was no longer a franchising agent. He was the CEO of McDonald's Corporation. The first thing Kroc did was standardize the culture. The brothers had created the perfect system, but Kroc understood that a multi-billion-dollar enterprise cannot rely on personal genius. It must rely on corporate uniformity. His obsession with consistency became legendary. He dictated every element of the operation: the size of the pickle slices, the length of the French fries, the precise number of seconds a patty remained on the grill. He had a saying: the quality of the hamburger in Anchorage must be the same as the quality of the hamburger in Mobile. He realized that predictability was the core value proposition. Customers would come to McDonald's because they knew exactly what they would get, everywhere, every time. This eliminated risk for the consumer and built an unparalleled level of brand trust. To enforce this uniformity across thousands of independent franchisees, Kroc created his most lasting institutional innovation: Hamburger University. Opened in 1961 in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, Hamburger University was not a gimmick. It was a corporate boot camp designed to transfer the operational genius of the McDonald brothers to every franchisee and manager globally. Its purpose was simple: eliminate human error and train managers to worship the system above all else. At Hamburger University, managers learned every technical detail: how to calculate the optimal meat-to-fat ratio, how to manage inventory flow, and how to maintain the profitability of the business model. This training facility was the ultimate leverage. It allowed McDonald's to scale infinitely without diluting the quality or consistency of the product. The managers who graduated were not just cooks, they were system engineers dedicated to Kroc's vision. Kroc had solved the management problem, but he still faced immense financial risk. The Franchise Realty Corporation was leveraged to the maximum, buying land and buildings for every new store. To pay for this relentless expansion, Kroc was constantly fighting the banks, which viewed the sheer scale of the debt as a terrifying liability. Kroc's only way out was to go public, and he had to do it before the banks finally said no. Chapter 4. By 1965, Ray Kroc had achieved full control of McDonald's and standardized the entire system through Hamburger University, but the expansion had pushed the company's debt to a critical, unsustainable level. The only way to pay off the massive bank loans held by the Franchise Realty Corporation was to bring in outside capital. Kroc needed to execute an initial public offering, IPO. The IPO was not a choice, it was a necessity. Kroc had to sell a piece of the company to save the whole operation. The day McDonald's went public in 1965 was the moment Kroc went from being a broke salesman to an overnight multi-millionaire. The stock opened at $22 and closed the day at $30. Ray Kroc had secured his personal financial destiny. The shares he held in the newly public company instantly vaulted his net worth into the tens of millions. He had finally achieved the wealth that had eluded him for his entire life. But the IPO was the moment that the McDonald brothers' ultimate financial tragedy began. When Kroc paid the brothers $2.7 million in 1961, the deal was finalized before the company became a public entity. The brothers had signed away their rights for a massive, immediate payout. The written contract transferred all rights to Kroc, but it failed to include the 0.5% perpetual royalty, the small piece of gross sales that the brothers were originally entitled to after the buyout. This was a critical omission. The brothers later claimed that this perpetual royalty, which would have amounted to millions of dollars per year and potentially billions in the decades that followed, was promised in a handshake deal between Kroc and Mac McDonald. Kroc consistently denied this verbal agreement, since the perpetual royalty was not written into the final contract and Kroc's entire career was built on the sanctity of the written word. He used the law to his advantage. The McDonald brothers received their $2.7 million. Ray Kroc received the endless future revenue generated by the land and the stock. As McDonald's grew into a global colossus, the brothers' one-time payment shrank to an insignificant footnote. The very small royalty they had requested, that 0.5%, would have made them billionaires many times over, because it was based on a handshake and not legal documentation. They were denied the ongoing financial success of the empire they invented. This final financial separation cemented Kroc's image in history. He was the ultimate entrepreneur who created immense wealth, but only by ensuring the original inventors received a defined terminal payment instead of a share of the perpetual legacy. With the IPO complete, Ray Kroc shifted his focus from surviving debt to cementing the system's longevity. The first and most critical task was to complete the standardization of the food. Kroc had eliminated the original founders, but he still had to eliminate regional variations. He insisted that McDonald's must not be reliant on local supply chains. He personally flew across the country, securing contracts with potato processors and cattle ranchers to guarantee the exact specifications for the meat and the fries. He wasn't just buying food, he was buying consistency and vertical integration. He forced his franchisees to adhere to these standardized supply chains, ensuring the predictability that was the core value proposition of the brand. But the most famous example of Kroc's system being challenged and then triumphing came not from a financial crisis, but from a religious one. In the early 1960s, one of Kroc's most successful franchisees, Lou Groen, was struggling in a Cincinnati, Ohio store. Groen's store was in a predominantly Catholic neighborhood, and sales plummeted every Friday during the Lenten season, when practicing Catholics abstained from eating meat. Groen approached Kroc with a simple, desperate solution: a hot cheese sandwich called the hula burger, made from a slice of grilled pineapple. Kroc scoffed at the hula burger. It was messy, complicated, and violated the efficiency principle. However, Groen had another idea: a deep-fried fish sandwich that he called the filet-o-fish. Ray Kroc, the ultimate arbiter of the menu, had to be convinced. He agreed to a public test. Groen would sell his filet-o-fish alongside Kroc's own hula burger for one day. The winner would stay on the menu. The result was a brutal rout. The customers chose the filet-o-fish overwhelmingly. Kroc, recognizing the genius of the specific market solution, immediately added it to the national menu, allowing franchisees to deploy it in areas where the religious demand was high. The lesson was clear. Kroc was a ruthless businessman, but he was not immune to market data. If a franchisee could prove a profitable solution to a regional problem, the system would adopt it. The filet-o-fish became one of the most profitable menu items in the company's history. By the 1970s, Kroc had transformed from a tireless salesman into a corporate statesman. He understood that the company's survival now depended on its place in the American psyche. He shifted his focus to politics and public relations, making large charitable donations and becoming a vocal advocate for free enterprise. He was deliberately securing the brand's image as a pillar of American industry and a creator of opportunity, shifting the public narrative away from the controversial takeover of the McDonald brothers. Ray Kroc had built the perfect machine for scaling. He had the land, the system, the uniform product, and the public image. but the very system he created was about to turn on him, leading to internal conflict over the next great innovation. Chapter 5. By the mid-1960s, Ray Kroc had established a perfect machine focused on efficiency, predictability, and the 5-cent hamburger. The system was generating hundreds of millions of dollars, but Kroc's own success was turning into a dogma. He became aggressively resistant to any change that compromised the Speedee Service System's original simplicity. The new threat wasn't another company. It was the growing popularity of Burger King. Burger King was focused on customization. They advertised that customers could have it your way, offering a larger, customizable sandwich. Kroc's fixed 9-item menu could not compete with the growing demand for variety. The pressure to innovate came not from Kroc, but from his network of top franchisees. One of the most successful was Jim Deligatti, who ran several McDonald's restaurants in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. Deligatti watched his dinner and weekend sales drop as families went to competitors for larger sandwiches. He knew the system was great, but the menu was failing to capture the full market potential. Deligatti had an idea: a giant sandwich with 2 patties, cheese, and a secret sauce. He realized that to maintain the speed of the original assembly line, he couldn't just make the existing sandwich bigger, he had to stack it. The solution was the 3-part bun, a sesame seed bun with an extra slice in the middle to stabilize the 2 patties and toppings. It was complicated, messy, and totally violated Kroc's principle of extreme simplicity. Deligatti named it the Big Mac. Ray Kroc hated it. He despised the complexity. The multi-part bun slowed down the assembly process. The specific sauce required extra training and violated the rule that the product should be easy to replicate anywhere in the world. Kroc told Deligatti, "That's too much trouble for one sandwich." But Deligatti didn't ask Kroc for permission. He asked for forgiveness. He began test marketing the Big Mac in his stores, and the sales were explosive. The increased profit margins from the higher-priced item offset the complexity. The Big Mac proved that the system could handle complexity if the market demanded it. Kroc, ever the pragmatist, saw the numbers. When the results were undeniable, he conceded. In 1968, the Big Mac was officially added to the national menu. This internal fight demonstrated a powerful entrepreneurial lesson. Founders often become the primary obstacle to their own company's growth. Kroc's obsessive focus on efficiency had built the machine, but it was the independent thinking of his best franchisees that allowed the machine to adapt and conquer the next phase of the market. Ray Kroc had reluctantly approved the Big Mac, proving that his carefully engineered system could evolve to meet market demand. But the next great innovation came not from a menu item, but from necessity and logistics. The single greatest operational challenge to McDonald's was the rise of the suburban commute and the lunch rush. Customers needed food faster than even the Speedee Service System could deliver on foot. Kroc's system was designed for efficiency, but by the late 1960s, a competitor forced McDonald's to rethink the very architecture of their buildings. The drive-through window, while Kroc was initially skeptical, it added complexity to the kitchen, and the flow of the data was undeniable. Customers wanted to stay in their cars. The first documented McDonald's drive-through was opened in 1975 in Sierra Vista, Arizona, strategically built near an army base where regulations limited soldiers from getting out of their cars in uniform. The drive-through was not a luxury. It was a defense mechanism against competition and a response to the changing American lifestyle. It doubled the restaurant's operational capacity and revenue during peak hours by separating pedestrian flow from vehicle flow. Kroc, having learned the painful lesson of the Big Mac, quickly embraced the innovation, mandating the architecture be standardized across all new construction. By the 1970s, Kroc had accomplished his goal. He had built the ultimate machine. The company was a publicly traded, real estate-backed, globally recognized entity. The system was complete. Ray Kroc was no longer needed for the day-to-day operations. The system ran itself, enforced by Hamburger University graduates. In 1974, at the age of 72, Ray Kroc officially stepped down as CEO. This was not a quiet retirement. Kroc spent the final decade of his life fulfilling a different role: chief visionary and brand ambassador. He became a public figure known for his relentless optimism and his rags-to-riches story. He bought the San Diego Padres baseball team, injecting his competitive spirit into a new venture. He wrote his autobiography, Grinding It Out, cementing his own narrative as the sole, tireless founder of the empire. He continued to visit McDonald's locations, checking on the cleanliness, the consistency, and the service. He was the ultimate guardian of the system's integrity. On January 14, 1984, Ray Kroc died at the age of 81. By the time of his death, McDonald's had reached over 7,500 restaurants worldwide, and the value of the Franchise Realty Corporation was astronomical. The broke, 52-year-old salesman who was once living on the financial float left behind an estimated net worth of over $500 million in $1,984. He proved that success is not always about invention. It is about execution, ruthless focus on scaling, and securing the ultimate financial leverage. Chapter 6. Ray Kroc's story is often romanticized as the tale of an underdog salesman who finally made it. But the real lesson is darker, more complex, and ultimately more valuable for an entrepreneur. He didn't succeed because he was a better cook. He succeeded because he was a master of leverage, systems, and standardization. He proved that the inventor rarely reaps the full reward of their genius, the system builder does. Here are the 4 ultimate ruthless lessons from the founder's theft. 1. The real business is control the real estate pivot. The greatest strategic shift of Kroc's career was the realization that the food business offered unsustainable margins, but the real estate business offered perpetual cash flow and ultimate leverage. The lesson is, don't just chase high revenue. Find the high leverage asset in your business model. By creating the Franchise Realty Corporation, Kroc shifted his earnings from a tiny, volatile commission on hamburgers to stable high-margin rent and lease agreements. This change in the unit of sale gave him the financial security to survive and the legal power to control the franchisees, making him the ultimate winner. 2. Standardization is the true product hamburger university. The McDonald brothers invented the system, but Kroc perfected the standardization. He understood that the only way to scale without dilution was through absolute uniformity and rigorous training. He didn't just sell a burger, he sold the predictability of the experience. Hamburger University was not a gimmick. It was a necessary bootcamp that eliminated human error and guaranteed consistency across thousands of locations. Your success will be limited not by your best people, but by your average system. Kroc built a system so robust, it didn't need genius. It just needed adherence. 3. Execution trumps invention, the buyout. The ultimate moral of the story is the contrast between the brothers and Kroc. The McDonald brothers were brilliant inventors, focused on the perfection of a single restaurant. Ray Kroc was a relentless executor, focused on the perfection of the chain. The moment Kroc achieved absolute financial leverage, he immediately executed the $2.7 million buyout. This was the necessary move to eliminate the control that was anchoring his expansion. The lesson is simple and harsh. If you do not have the ambition or the capital to scale your own invention, someone else will buy it and scale it for you. The reward goes not to the innovator, but to the operator. For the value must be written down the handshake error. The tragic failure of the McDonald brothers was not their lack of genius, but their legal naivete. They trusted a salesman's handshake promise for a perpetual 0.5% royalty on amount that would have made them multi-billionaires and excluded it from the final written contract. Ray Kroc honored the written word and ignored the unwritten word, securing his legacy and ensuring the brothers received a terminal payment, not an eternal one. The final lesson is that in high-stakes business, trust is good, but flawless legal documentation is everything. The one thing Ray Kroc never left to chance was the signature on the contract.